My name is Callum Williams, business journalist for Payment Expert, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined today with Luke Middleton, Sales Director and Web3 Leader at Fireblocks. Before we get into all things Web3, Luke, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. How are you and how's your day been so far?
Yeah, no, look, great to be here, Callum. Thank you very much for obviously inviting me along. Day's pretty good. I'm currently in Madrid, where the weather seems to have followed us from London. So it's like ice cold. I'm at a conference. So to be honest, I haven't seen anything outside of this absolutely huge conference center. So, but all good. Can't complain.
Could you just, briefly describe who Fireblocks are, what they do, and your role within the company?
Yeah, so as you've said there, name's Luke Middleton. I essentially one of the commercial directors at Fireblocks. I'm the Web3 lead for UK and I Benelux. There's a couple of other pieces within that. But essentially, my role is speaking on a daily basis with some really, really cool people, some super intelligent people, really at leading edge technology, right? Whether that might be in a traditional corporation and the verticals that we would typically define, looking at what Starbucks, Nike, Adidas have done, and maybe looking at kind of really moving into the world of blockchain, all the way through to the crypto native Web3s, high conviction based businesses have been around for a while and really want to start utilizing the Fireblocks technologies to scale their business operations, essentially. So within that, really at its core, Fireblocks is a great question. Fireblocks essentially at the end of the day is an all-in-one digital asset platform. So we're a technology provider. We're not a custodian, which quite a lot of people get confused around. But essentially, we're providing organizations out there with features and functionalities to really build, run, and scale their digital asset operations. Now, furthermore to that, and what really differentiates us from the others is that we provide a direct custody model. So it used to be a very theoretical conversation, right? Sub-custody versus direct custody, counterparty risk, so on and so forth. Fast forward 18 months, and we've seen obviously the Luna collapse, 3AC, Voyager, Celsius, more recently FTX, and everything else within that space. The technology is now there for people to take ownership of their private keys and their digital assets and really mitigate risk. And essentially, when it really comes down to its core, Fireblocks is pretty much here to start providing some confidence and some security and comfortability back into the market so that we can get back on the trajectory of mass adoption across blockchain, right? That's essentially what we're really trying to do through the technology platform that we provide.
Yeah, and you mentioned that as well before. I mean, obviously the whole blockchain ecosystem, if you're going to include crypto in there, you've mentioned it's been quite a whirlwind, last 12 months for that sector. But then even just as recent as today, Fireblocks have announced a partnership with CoinCover. Could you talk to us a little bit about the importance of crypto and blockchain security, especially within how the market's been over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're two separate topics, right? So essentially, regardless of market and the macro, whether we're in a bear market, crypto winter, whether we're in a bull run, right? Vulnerabilities and fraudulent activity and bad actors are always going to be there regardless. As the trajectory of blockchain mass adoption occurs, we're probably going to see more and more agents move into this space, right? When we really think about what blockchain is, it's essentially this trustless, permissionless, immutable distributed ledger, right? Which essentially gives people the ability to look at smart contracts, the ability to look at the code environments within it or the code structures, which gives them higher probability of fraudulent activity, right? Really looking at where the vulnerabilities lie within that. So to your point there, it is absolutely essential that any business organization doesn't just look at the technology that they're trying to provide organizations out there, but actually looks at the ecosystem around them and how they can complement their cybersecurity platform or whatever kind of, constructs or mechanisms they have in place to safeguard their customers. How can they further proof by utilizing third parties out there? So CoinCover is just one that you mentioned there. We have a huge ecosystem of organizations out there that further proof the Fireblocks proposition. CoinCover being one of them, right, around private key management, so on and so forth. Chain analysis from an AML KYT perspective, Elliptic alongside those guys as well. The ecosystem's extensive and it's going to keep growing, right? We're not just one isolated platform, one isolated organization. We recognize that there are a number of different turnkey solutions out there that can complement the Fireblocks proposition. And I think when you really look at it at the end of the day, managing, safely securing that private key is absolutely fundamental when you start playing within the world of blockchain. cryptocurrencies, NFTs, whatever way that you want to frame it, let's categorize as Web3, right? A nice encompassing word for everything there. You don't want to be writing down a seed phrase on a piece of paper, right? Technology is now at the point where you don't need that anymore, especially if you're a business and you're looking at operational scalability. You need to be utilizing technology like Fireblocks does with MPC, so multi-party computation, to safe, institutional grade security, multi-layered security approaches, best of breed technology in this space to make sure that your customers are as secure as possible. You're providing these guardrails, which is giving them institutional security, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was going to go into that a bit more with blockchain adoption and Web3 elements, these businesses adopting these. I mean, obviously, I think you may have heard that HSBC was buying land in the metaverse last year. And, there's obviously, your Nikes and your Starbucks are adopting NFTs. Why is it now more than ever that these large entities are starting to tap into Web3? And is this kind of like they're getting ahead of the game now, or is this just how it is now?
Yeah, there's a really, really good question. And I think a lot of the Web3 native, crypto native organizations really, you've got to take this back and really understand the fundamental values and the business benefits that blockchain is going to bring. Not just business benefits, humanitarian benefits it's going to bring to the world, right? The distribution of wealth management, peer-to-peer connectivity, capital efficiencies, operational efficiencies. The list just goes on, right? I think Chris Dixon throws a really good, I'm quoting him directly here, but he essentially says, Web3 essentially is the web for builders and users, right? Just utilizing tokens, right? Whether that might be NFTs and cryptocurrencies, but it's essentially providing ownership within this new ecosystem to these organizations around these efficiencies. Now, yeah, you're absolutely right there. I think the typical TradFi world has been a bit slow to adoption from this perspective, and probably not wrong in terms of the stigma that's been attached. Very little regulation around this kind of industry at the moment, but they've seen and they've understood and they've recognized the business benefits that blockchain is going to provide. Web3 is absolutely inevitable. It's coming, right? And there are a ton of business benefits to these organizations. I on a daily basis I'm in a fortunate position where I speak with organizations from, marketing agencies, high net worth incorporated individuals, neobanks, huge bank custodians, for example. And then to the opposite end of the extreme, the metaverse organizations out there. But to your point there, I think a lot of these corporations now are really getting a handle on a grasp on actually what the underlying benefits of this technology are and what essentially they can do in the future, right? And it's mainly around capital efficiencies, if I'm honest. The long-term goal of this is decentralized technologies, right? Essentially where we are going to be removing these intermediaries, the TradFi world to an extent. But up until that point, a lot of the let's classify Web 2 and Web 2.5 to encompass everything outside of blockchain. They've seen the business benefit and they are all moving. Whether you think they are or they're not, they are building in the background right now at the right time. We're in a bear market. There's a lot of hype globally around macro at the moment. A lot of fear around the traditional constructs of what we're used to working within. People want something new. And a lot of these high conviction based businesses in Web3 and the old traditional TradFi organizations and corporates are now playing within this space. Nike, I think maybe they worked with a couple of studios on their first NFT drop without really understanding the true value. I think they grossed just over 200 million in additional revenue streams, right? That is just, a drop in the ocean in terms of what they can essentially kind of bring from this.
It's good that you mentioned Nike and what they were able to do with NFT revenue, because I actually also seen there was some research on that, and they was so far ahead of the game in terms of everybody else in terms of their revenue. I mean, they've got stuff like Nike Land with, interactive elements within that. I mean, when you're speaking to some of these clients and these banks, what are some of their negatives or drawbacks or precautions when it comes to opening up the idea to Web3, and how do you kind of, bring them in to Web3 essentially?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So, and this is a very, very hot topic right now. When you look at crypto natives, typically within, young developers within this space, right? They understand the underlying benefits. It's a very different conversation to where we've just said there, right? But when we typically look at the old guard, let's call it, there is a stigma attached with blockchain at the moment. No matter how you want to look at it, based on the last 18, 24 months of what's happened within the market, there is a stigma attached to this. So first and foremost is institutional security. Are you able to safely secure these digital assets if we play with this, right? Now, they don't want digital assets on their balance sheet, right? There is a stigma attached from a regulatory standpoint. There's a lot of mist around this at the moment. Yes, there is more regulation coming with MiCA, the travel rule later this year. However, there is stigma still attached to this and regulatory grayness, or fuzziness, should we call it. Now, when I typically speak with these organizations, first and foremost is really knowledge. There's a huge knowledge gap at the moment around actually what is the underlying technology? What does it do from a business perspective? What is it going to provide us from a revenue generating stream? And then the second question around is security. How are you guys safely securing these assets? What liability do we have along these? And typically, we provide this direct custody model. So essentially, we're removing that kind of regulatory issue piece there. We're providing features and functionalities for these organizations to really scale their operations, if that makes sense. So it's more of an education session with them to really get them to understand what's going on. They absolutely know they have to do it because they've seen some of the really strong use cases out there. I think testament to the fashion industry, for example, which was inevitably low-hanging fruit, but they've done a great job in utilizing NFT technology on a number of different protocols out there to generate additional revenue streams, right? To have, far superior evolved loyalty schemes, right? NFTs don't just kind of stop at checkout, generalized emails, the odd text here and there, right? You're almost going into co-creation. We're building these really defined communities through these NFT, token gated NFT constructs. And it's just evolving that interaction that organizations or entities have with their consumers. And they absolutely recognize this. But I think in closing kind of what I'm covering there's two particular areas. Knowledge, 110% is missing right now. And I think operational control of these organizations is a question mark for them. Do they have the right talent in-house? Where can they find that talent? Because essentially they can buy all the technology in the world, all the platforms, but they need people with the right cultures in place, the right operational models to actually build out this technology and really bring applications and business services to their consumers. And that's where they're struggling at the moment.
Yeah, and also you switched up on NFTs there and how the fashion game is kind of warming up to the idea of NFTs. But if you take your mind back to 2021, NFTs was like the hottest thing on the market, wasn't it? For most of that year. I mean, you had celebrities kind of driving this popularity and surging it to like all-time highs. But now we're recently just seeing a slowdown or a decline in the popularity of NFTs. So is this the end for NFTs, or have they got a more of extended shelf life in the future?
When you really look at where Web3 is going, and NFTs are going to transform the world. They will be the underlying technology of essentially every vertical out there, whether you know it, that it's based on NFT technology or blockchain technology, or you don't. That's a completely separate question. But it will be the underlying technology of majority of business loyalty schemes, ticketing, so on and so forth, right? And there's a number of reasons behind that. There's so much value in what NFTs can provide. But I think to your question, crypto winter's been an interesting one, because when you really look at the macro within blockchain, it's removed a lot of the low conviction, same NFT projects and dApps out there. A lot of this stuff has been built on the same tech, nothing new there, nothing interesting, and it's removed those. Now, it's an unfortunate event for a lot of people that have lost money or, have tried to build companies and it's not worked, but it's left the high conviction based dApps and specifically the high conviction based blue chip NFT projects. Now, within the world of Web3 and crypto natives like yourself and me, we understand the underlying values of NFTs and the multi-utility that they're going to provide. But for people that are just coming into this world, unfortunately, the blue chip kind of side of NFTs right now is more marketed around digital identity and provenance. So essentially a Bored Ape. If you look at it, it's a PFP image of an ape, right? People will look at that and go, why are people paying $500,000 for a picture of a Bored Ape, right? But that's only one layer, right? When you really start skinning it and looking underneath the underlying technology and what the multi-utility is behind that, you're able to provide these amazing close-knit communities, co-creation, people that are so built and so kind of glued to your particular brand that they're providing you unique insight to actually what consumers want to see. They're even going past the consumer model, right? As I mentioned earlier, you're becoming co-creators of these brands. So, the old analogy is, two heads are always better than one, right? You're allowing all of these people to come into these really close-knit communities, providing them unique experiences through these token-gated communities, providing swagger drops to these people, right? A really good example of this was Bored Ape. I think it could have been last year, maybe in the year before. I think it was one of the first that happened. Bored Ape's collaboration with Adidas, right? They did a drop to all Bored Ape holders, right? That is an amazing kind of unique experience that you'll receive through being an NFT holder, right? Not to mention the investment value behind an NFT, the royalties behind NFTs for business benefits, right? And the example I always go to in NFTs, because this is very, very specific, more within the UK because of football. But if you think of someone like Manchester United and you purchase tickets from Manchester United and you're unable to go to that game, typically you'll go to Ticketmaster, centralized organization, will take a lot of the cash away from you. It kills revenue from Manchester United. All they get effectively is bums on seats at the stadium, right? What NFTs are going to provide Manchester United is a huge additional revenue stream through royalties, right? Because when you look at the underlying technology of royalties, every single time that ticket transacts hands or moves, Manchester United will define what royalty they want to take from that NFT, anything between 0 and 10%. That is absolutely massive, you think, from a game perspective. Not only are they going to get closer to the community and their fans and be able to drive marketing material to them, and also have a very clear feedback loop and new positive, unique experiences, but they're going to create a huge additional revenue stream. And if you look at football today, incredibly competitive at the top, so much money being spent. When you really look at real business benefit, if they need to go out there and buy the next Leo Messi, that could be providing them the additional revenue just through the royalties of NFTs alone, let alone the community benefits that come with NFTs. So I hope that kind of speaks to a lot of people within the UK, especially, or football fanatics out there. But that's just one real world use case of what NFTs are going to provide the world. Airline travel is another one. Huge market potential, right? Underlying NFT tickets. A lot of people have issues with the fact that if you cancel a flight, you don't get the cash back. They'll credit you with the same airline, right? I'd love to see what the execution rate is on people utilizing that credit that they get back, right? I imagine it's probably either in the single digits, right? But giving people the ability to transfer that NFT to another person within a secondary market is absolutely huge. So I hope that kind of provides a bit of clarity around where I personally feel NFTs are going to go. They're not going away anytime soon. I just think it's unfortunate right now that a lot of the stuff that we see marketed is more around, I guess, art and digital identity versus what the multi-utility purpose of an actual NFT is going to provide from an underlying infrastructure perspective going forward within businesses.
Diving into the metaverse, just briefly, we know we're seeing quite a lot of these, metaverse type companies. Meta, for example, they've invested huge amounts of money into their metaverse. I know as recent as yesterday, South Korea launched their the world's first publicly backed metaverse in Seoul. So could you tell us a bit more about how the metaverse is becoming more adaptable for businesses going into this year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great question. So I think first and foremost, it's about understanding actually what the metaverse construct is, right? And I don't think one is going to win. I think it will be much like operating systems out there. You have your Linuxes, Mac OS, Windows, for example. They can all coexist within the same ecosystem. But essentially, what the metaverse and obviously through NFT technology, blockchain technologies, it's going to be providing this interoperability, right? And what does that actually mean? People throw it out there all the time, right? And the analogies that I always like to use around this for the gamers out there, you spend hundreds and hundreds of hours playing Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, World of Warcraft, Metal Gear Solid, whatever it is, to find items to evolve your character, right? But essentially, the moment COD 2, Modern Warfare comes out, however you want to kind of wrap this, all those hours are essentially redundant. You've left a ton of your time and effort back in that previous game, and you start from scratch, right? What essentially NFT technology in the metaverse is going to provide is this interoperability. So it's going to give you the ability to take one of those characters from one of those games and move it instantly, augmented, automatically into another metaverse concept. So the ability to build this digital identity through an avatar as a really simple use case to provide really, really unique kind of indicators on your own digital identity to stand out above others is a huge thing within, within tech, right? And especially gaming. So first and foremost, people need to understand actually what this is going to provide. Okay. And I think this also comes in terms of culture. The new kids coming through want something different. I think social media, news outlets, fake news, however you want to look at it, has caused a lot of macro hype around they want to try something new. The new kids have brought up mobile phones, iPads, so on and so forth. They are digital first, and they have seen this world of blockchain. They see what that can provide, but it gives them an avenue to go into this new virtual world, this digital world, and be able to really express themselves through digital identity. And you can translate that into the business world as well, right? In terms of looking at a business in the metaverse, you're first and foremost marketing to next generation talent that's going to be coming through. Okay, so great example, Heineken. Heineken created a virtual brewery. I believe it was on Decentraland, right? Now, for what purpose? Can't buy beer there, but it was to generate hype. It's to show that you're doing things, leading edge technology, where you can start building a community within that space, right? You can also recognize through IDs, however you want to shape it, actually what this new consumer base looks like. So you're getting an angle in terms of what your new consumer base is going forward. You're seen as the new cool company out there. You're doing things in a really cool space. That's absolutely huge, right? And another clean example here, much like COVID really changed the world, right? From a remote perspective, Zoom went kind of through the roof from a stock perspective. The metaverse construct, right, is essentially globalization. It is bringing people together from a global perspective, whether you're in Mexico, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Japan. It's putting all these people into this one immersive environment where they can interact with each other digitally. It's creating these cohesive environments which people are going to be able to interact. And it started with going online with an avatar, looking at someone, looking back, maybe doing a wave. But this is going to become almost an open marketplace where people are able to trade, whether that's crypto, whether that's NFTs, but really interact with each other, not just on a B2C level, but a B2B level. So you're essentially, from a business perspective, creating this brand new funnel where revenue is going to occur, right? Which is super interesting, with the underlying benefits of NFTs, where you are able to interact at a much more efficient level, engage with these consumers in a much more complex manner. It's just an infinite world of possibilities in terms of where this is going, and we are just at the start of it right now.
Yeah, so that's kind of like what you was touching on then before. It's kind of like almost becoming the new wave of promotion and marketing, right, to these different type of audience.
Absolutely, and you've also got to be mindful of the barriers that we have to overcome within this space, right? And I think talent is in abundance right now. I think one of the worst crypto winters we ever saw last year, right? I think let's call it average me about 70% globally. Kind of the crypto market went down, right? I think when you look at web developers or Web3 developers from last year, increased by 7%. I think we're back up to around 23,000 developers within the space, right? This isn't going away anytime soon. There are people building during bear markets. This is when things are going to really start evolving, right? And that really plays into the fact that this technology is going to be here for a very, very long time. It's going to be the next evolution of web, hence Web3. It's about organizations really understanding what are the barriers to entry here, right? And knowledge, as I said earlier, knowledge is a really big issue. We need more and more education platforms out there to really give people an understanding of what blockchain as a whole is going to bring to the party, so to speak. And the other side of this is user experience. As we all know, for anyone that's been in the world of crypto, blockchain, from let's call it 2015 onwards, when SushiSwap kind of released some of the first, I guess, mass marketed liquidity pools. It was everywhere. You had about 30 browsers open. That is not a way of improving mass adoption, right? UX experiences absolutely have to improve. And I think last but not least within this is tooling. When we look at NFT infrastructures, I think need to improve. I think the tooling capability around NFTs is much more improved than it has been, but there's still room for improvement within that. And then last but not least is these DAO constructs, so decentralized autonomous organizations, which in my personal experience, I feel are going to be the governing bodies behind the future businesses, the next Facebooks, next AWSs of this world, but more tooling around those DAO structures as well to give people the ability to differentiate these products. So there are barriers, long story short, that we do need to overcome to see mass adoption of Web3 in general, which obviously encompasses Web3 as well as NFTs, so on and so forth.
Yeah, you couldn't have described it any better there, Luke. And honestly, yeah, I think you've wrapped it up pretty well. So could you let us know if Fireblocks have got anything coming up in the near future or so in terms of innovating the Web3 space?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have a huge focus on Web3 right now. We Fireblocks recognizes Web3 is absolutely the future, right? And as I mentioned at the start of this, we have an all-in-one digital asset platform providing direct custody to organizations. We have a Web3 engine within that. We are putting in a lot of development work into this to have essentially this it's a single pane of glass for organizations looking at the creation of or tokenization in general to utilize our platform with institutional security to really scale what these businesses look like. There'll be some announcements coming in Q1 of some very, very large organizations coming onto the platform around this space, but a lot of concentrated effort is going into Web3 because we just recognize it as the absolute future. I think there's a generalized theory within the world of Web3, right? That crypto trading was going to be the first part, zero business applications, zero business services. It was all about tokens pumping like 5 million%, people making a lot of money. But from a long-term perspective and kind of hockey curve growth was always going to be utility, real world business services, real world business applications that are providing real world utility. And we're now seeing that trajectory curve kind of heavily increase. And we're trying to provide the features, the tooling, the functionality to these organizations to be the next AWS, the next kind of, the next Activision, the next Microsoft, the next Blizzard. That's essentially where we're coming from, whilst providing comfortability and confidence in blockchain to provide mass adoption.
I think we'll leave it there. So thank you very much, Luke. I appreciate your time and hopefully speak to you again in the near future soon.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.